Three things that I'm kind of curious about, which is a collective organization model that partners with artists to drive forward an already established vision, an existing campaign which you articulate to and then collaborate with, and then almost creating a new space for outside of existing organizations and pushing it forward on your own terms. And to me, they're all just three strands of growing our communities and growing humans. So I'm wondering, as each of you come from that kind of different perspective, have you worked in the other side? Like as Acorn, have you ever led in a campaign that's been created and pushed by the artist, and then you played the supportive role? Have you come into an organization that's already had a more cohesive vision and just done the more contract work, and this is our role? And then for you, in either direction, because we all play our role for a purpose, you know. And I'm wondering, just like the pros and cons you each see of each other's strategy.
Well, I'll start. I mean, I'm going to give an example that's last year, or last fall, in fact, fairly recent, in Dharavi. You don't have any footage, because it's sort of, I won't go through the names to protect the innocent. An artist out of New York had a group of people, and he had an idea. He wanted to go to Dharavi, stay there for 2 months, and create art in our slum. So he reached out to us. He asked if we would basically be his host, which meant somehow legitimize their project in Dharavi. And he, you know, was all over Facebook and Kickstarter and whatever. I was a little surprised to see that he was trying to raise money, since he was basically asking us just to do it out of love, which we'd agreed to do. And so I was very interested after they left, when next time I went to Mumbai, what was the experience of talking to the leaders and staff and everybody else. It was terrible. Essentially, they were like a parasite on the organization. They got some press. They put up a couple of, you know, we had to broker the relationships in the community. But they were like an alien invasion. They made no effort to connect with us, with the community, to create anything that basically spoke to mutuality, to a common interest, or to what we were doing or anybody else. And so they just saw it more as an exotic locale, and they've moved off to try to do this in other cities too. So, you know, you just try to say, hey, you know, once burned, twice learned, but, you know, unless it is a collaborative, there is no hope. But this kind of situation really doesn't necessarily build bridges with at least mass-based organizations that have their own constituency and interest. Somebody's got a better story to tell, I'm sure. And I didn't tell that story until you provoked me, you know, just to make sure.
So yeah, I'd say like 99% of the work that we do is based on relationships, like friendships, real close, trust. And I have that like one story of the time where I took a contract with an organization I didn't know, and I felt like I was really treated, instead of a partner, like, you work for me. You're gonna do what I say. I was like, I'm not a machine. You know, like in so much of my purpose around like how do we recover our humanity and reconnect to each other. Like, it was such an aha. I was like, oh, like starting without relationship, like that's why it ended up, like I ended up feeling horrible at the end of that project. And I don't, you know, like, not to say that's just like my side of the story kind of thing, you know, like I'm sure there were things where they're like, why doesn't she just do what we're asking? But I think we've really had like the realization that the best work comes out of like true, like community is built through a relationship. And without that, like it's not really doing what we want. And so like with the example of Arizona, like we're figuring out how to shrink the distance. We're talking about doing Skype workshops where they were like texting right now, we're trying to do this technical part of it, what do we do? And I'm like, here, Zeus, tell them, you know. So we're you know, we're figuring it out. Every time people from Arizona come, they stay at our house. And, you know, they're like, you have your house here now. So it's that mutuality that you're talking about. I think like that's what's gonna build the like product part of the process. Like that's what's gonna make the pieces we do together stronger. That's what's gonna allow us to really support each other. You know, they have our backs, we have theirs. So I feel like lesson learned. Lesson learned. Yeah.
My answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
A surgeon has a particular procedure that they do. That's why they're called a surgeon. A healer sits with the patient and listens to the body and determines in dialogue what's needed. So I'm very mission driven. It's like, what is the mission in terms of how you get there? That is wide open. It depends on what the body needs, what the community needs. So that I have worked in all of those ways. And had satisfactory experiences in all of them, which doesn't seem to be true of all of my comrades. But yes, the question is what is needed. And sometimes I'm brought in as one thing and end up being something else. I've had people come to me and say, we want you to do this series of cartoons. We saw how it helped that campaign. And it turns out that that union local actually was starting to develop a consciousness of itself. And it was smarter for them to take the guy who was always cracking bad jokes in meetings, partner her up with the sister who was doodling, and you have a cartoonist. And it might not be slick and potential and professional, but it comes from within, so that it's wide open. And again, that distinction between organizer and artist isn't there. It's how do you boost the collective immune system of a particular community?
Can I ask a question? Because Mark, it seemed to me what you were talking about. I mean, I really, Melody, I'm somewhat challenging the relationship thing because it seems to me that what Mark was talking about was a different politic. It was a new politic. And having a different politic was actually the basis for the work and the relationship. So I'm curious about that because people say, you know, you can't do anything about, you know, without relationships, but, you know, a lot of us were against the wars, and what bonded us was the politics. I mean, we didn't necessarily have a relationship. We agreed politically, and were able to sort of move in concert around some stuff, even though we had divergent views about other things. So what do you all think about the deal between politics and relationships?
I would maybe challenge or replace the word politics with values. And
why?
Well, because what I was talking about was shared values in different modalities, right? Different methodologies around shared values, or methodologies or modalities that respond to a question that indicate value, but not necessarily politics. Although I see how they could be synonymous. The reason why I go back is because a lot of the work that we did was really in response to and in reflection of different mentors, you know, Brett, who's in the room, and others who challenged essentially an object-driven politic or ethic of organizing. The object is to organize around a rally, or like the rally is the object, or the theater piece is the object, or the poster or the festival is the object. And part of what we discovered was that we were really good object makers. And so there was great either lived or static iconography to reflect our skill at making objects. A great poem, a great poster, a great painting, a great mural. But when the object dissipated, there wasn't a politic in place to keep the object makers together. And so rather than think about objects, and Jeff alluded to this in terms of episodic politics, right? Rather than focus on, okay, we're gonna move to pass this law, the law or passing the law wasn't the reason for being, the value is the reason for being. This is stuff that was mentioned before, right? So organizing around values and then pedagogically framing the organizing around questions rather than values gives a different level of agency to all the folks in the room. The interdependence is a reflection of different modalities coming together to respond to the same question in different ways. And so, yeah, it's a politic of interdependence, it's an ecological politic, but it doesn't come from the politics themselves, it comes from values and different modalities.
I saw a hand over there.
Yeah, I had a question. Wade, when you were, or in your experience working with other countries, have people resisted some of the techniques that Acorn has taken to those communities? Maybe this question can also go to Melanie going to Arizona. Have people resisted some of the techniques that have been shared?
You know, the nice thing about organizing Acorn in the United States is you had one organization, one corporation, all the membership dues, centralized finance, centralized communications, centralized this, that, and the other, and there was an organizing model, one organizing model, so you could walk into the Oakland office, New Orleans, Brooklyn, you know, and each city is different, but you'd know you were in an Acorn office. The same button, same flag, whatever. A federation is a collection of autonomous organizations. So, in fact, they come together in different ways. There are some in Canada. If you were in any of the Canadian offices for Acorn Canada, you could feel like you were in an old Acorn office in the U.S. But that's not true in Mumbai. It's not true in Nairobi. It's not true in Rome or all of these. They're informed by the same ideological principles of commitment to mass organization, self-sufficiency, membership, leadership, organizers, you know, the basic values, I hate to use that word, but the basic values and ideology are the same, but the organizing model is, you know, has had to be more organic and flexible to, you know, allow different kinds of things. You know, on the earlier question, and Gary, just because I'm saying something, I have one sentence. On Gary's question, for us, as an organizer, I'm always having to ask people to do something. And it's amazing to me how many times the answer is yes. But of course, I don't swallow the ask. I do ask, you know, whether it's somebody to pay dues or somebody to, and people are amazingly generous because there is a political connection. Often I don't know these people at all. So the notion that, I can't even imagine what the luxury of time as an organizer would be to have to establish a you know, a systematic value base that was the same before you collaborate. Because in some cases, you know, it's need-based. It's immediate. It's you know, got to happen then, and you have to be able to find somebody who you can come to common cause with, establish that pretty quickly. And I think great relationships are built after that. But you know, I've come to it in a great way, but sometimes in a different way through an assumption of a political commonality that may not be true for everybody, and you may find out later it wasn't true. Rebuilding New Orleans is a good example. Everybody believes in rebuilding New Orleans. Not everybody believes in democracy. You know, it turns out when we're talking about charter schools and whether or not you have an elected school board, whoa, I mean, you know, there are a lot of people that would just as soon have an autocratic, you know, technocratic, teach America, break the union, charter school, and call it rebuilding New Orleans. Well, that's not us, and some of those people we work with in a lot of ways, but there is no value commonality, yet they will bleed on the issue of rebuilding New Orleans. So, you know, you end up having to, you know, when Gary and I were, you know, being old as dirt, when we first got into the business, they had this terrible sexist expression that we didn't have to sleep together to work together. And so you were sort of trained in a methodology that said, you work with a lot of people. They're all different. They all come from, you know, not everybody is going to be the same, and
I heard it
you
was the
build
opposite.
relationships with them.
I'm just gonna